inviting me to speak to you. It's this group is a group that I struggle with in terms of finding the right topic to address the group. I mean, I'm very familiar with GIS. I spent over 25 years in digital mapping with software going back to 1986 with a company called ETAC, creating digital navigation software back then, where we didn't even have CD, for example. It was mainly tape drive. So I struggled for a little bit, and I talked to Mark, and I said, look, this group is familiar with software, they're familiar with GIS mapping topics and maps, and have been collecting a lot of data for the last 20 plus years. So it kind of culminated into the right moment. I mean, at Tableau, going back to what Mark said, I had over 25 years of experience in digital mapping. But with Tableau, what we do at Tableau is amazing. We take software and we enable everyone to make use of their data very easily, okay, to help understand and make use of your data. So then the topic I came up with, well, they're geeked out every day with data, just like I am. So what would be a topic that would stimulate and compel these people to sit and listen for 30 minutes? So the topic is going to be telling great stories with data, and I'm sure throughout your day-to-day work, this is somewhere in your mind. I don't know if it's primarily in your mind, but you're producing reports, you're producing maps, charts to deliver to your customers, to your boss, to your departments that need it. But the main thing is, when you do that, are you coming back up to a certain level in terms of, certain altitude to take a look at the content? Are you really telling a story, or are you just answering the what? Are you answering also the why? And hopefully this presentation through this deck in the 30 minutes that I'm going to speak will outline some of those criteria and give you some best examples, best practices of what those things are, so that you can hopefully take away some key points. The PowerPoint presentation and the demos embedded in it will also be available. I made that available to Mark, so you can also download that and dive in and get really deep with data and how you use that. Because through 30 minutes, we're not going to get too deep into the presentation in terms of the demo. So don't have the time for that. Can I see really quick, through a show of hands in the room, who are the collectors of data and or works with data on a day-to-day basis? Wow, the entire room. Great. Who receives reports? Okay, good. So this would resonate very well with you, and hopefully it will, for the people who receive reports and look at reports, content, PowerPoint presentation, etc., you will walk away with an understanding that, hey, I want more stuff for my staff. I want more stuff from the people that deliver these reports. And for people who are creating stuff, hopefully it will stimulate you to say, hey, you know what, the data that I have is really, really important. And there's a lot more to this data than just numbers that I'm showing to my boss or to my customers. Get this guy to work. Okay. So let's get started with telling a great story with data. What does that mean? Boy. It should be here. The clicker. Okay, so telling a story with data. We're going to cover these topics. One, we're going to talk a little bit about what storytelling is with data. Look at some examples of that made around the world. And then we'll dive into the components. What makes a data story? There are pieces, components of that, and then also story makeover, which basically covers the various steps of what you need to do in your reports, in your outputs to your customers and your boss, and to make that a compelling story. We'll take a look at some best practices in other industries as well as in the oil and gas industry. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the patterns in terms of what types of patterns can you obtain from looking at these reports and interacting with these reports. In general, when you create your reports today to deliver, when you receive your reports today, do you deliver a static report, or is it an interactive experience? Static. Interactive. Show of hands. None of the above. Okay, great. What we want to do here is in storytelling, you want to create your output. Doesn't matter what medium it's in, doesn't matter what platform, doesn't matter what software you use. You want to create that to be an interactive experience. Of course, you want to answer a particular topic, whether or not you're on target or whatever that topic is. You want to answer that, but you want to provide it in an interactive mode so that the user that reads that report can interact and dive deeper and get additional insights from that. So here's the statement. Typically in PowerPoint presentation, typically in reports, you see bullet points, like lines, bullet points. This is if Petco Park in San Diego changes its wall, okay, the visitors will have an advantage over the Padres in terms of historical data, in terms of home runs. It could be true, but it's a pretty boring statement. You can't visualize, you can't see that. But if you go to this image, which is a map, and this is an interaction here. So let me see if I can click this and interact with it. There we go. It's not coming up over there. Okay, this is not. This is not running. It's supposed to switch over. So what I attempted to do was click this particular PowerPoint, and it's supposed to open up a workbook. What Tableau does is it enables you to bring in maps, brings it in data, and you can interact with that data. So by looking at this particular picture alone, you can see that if they move the walls in and out a little bit, you will see that the yellow dots basically indicate potential changes in that particular game. Those dots would then be home runs. Now this wall, as you know, if you're familiar with baseball, that wall is a little further out than most other stadiums. So if they move it in a little bit, you'll get additional home runs for the visitors versus the Padres, 59 more. I can't interact with this. Close this up and go to the next one. So here's another statement in the process. The Argentine peso is overvalued. Okay, what does that mean? So if we go to this particular report, this shows two trend lines, two lines. The green is the official value of the Argentine peso, and the blue is the unofficial overvalue of that dollar, of that peso. If you look at this, you know right away that the gap between these two lines is very dangerous. It's so big to the point that it could basically collapse and create all kinds of issues in terms of economic issues, economic unrest, etc. Let me see if I can now click on this and have it run. It's running over here. Not over there.
Right, you see on the laptop.
Yeah. I'm going to take this phone. Where's that phone? Sorry about that. So when I talk about interactive reports, we're talking about this. This is a report made by a local newspaper, and on their online medium, they we have connections in here. This is connected, yes. this may not work too well. I was going to interact with this dash, so let's go to the next one. Here's a quote from a famous poet and an activist, Muriel. She said, "The world is made of stories, not atoms." Now the guys from Big Bang is not going to agree with this, but it's what it is. I mean, she spent her whole life trying to convince people of all types of topics that stories make up life, make up the real world, not individual incidents, et cetera, et cetera. But how you tell that story is very, very important. Also, most data stories, most reports have to deal and are related to people. Now, those things affect the operations of your facilities, it could affect your sales, et cetera. But at the end of the day, it's about people. So keep that in mind as you create reports. Keep that in mind as you read your reports, et cetera. It's about the people. Let me see if I can interact with this. Somebody said it's not going out.
Try to hit the internet.
In here, you will see that there are tabs. Oh, there you go.
There we go.
Right. And those tabs allow you to interact with that particular topic, with that particular story. Read. Oh, there you go. So here, with this story, this is about crime, okay, in South America. But if you look at it, these are the things that you're used to looking at. Can you see that? The maps is kind of dark. But you see the maps, you see numbers, you see bar charts, you see all kinds of things, but they're all related to people. So this is one way, this is one of the new ways in terms of communicating stories. It's not just about text. It's not about a text and a picture that you see on a newspaper or on a digital medium, but it's about presenting that content in this context, in terms of statistics, in terms of how links, in terms of how it affects this customer, that market, that segment, or those lives. Okay. So we go here. So what makes a data story? So when you look at the data story, it's just like reading any novel, any story. It contains these particular components. There's 4 of these, and Tableau suggests that we follow basically the same structure as we create our reports, as we create our PowerPoint to present. We follow these 4 things. There are characters that we talk about, or topics. There are also challenges or issues that we want to highlight. And there are insights that you gain from resolving those particular challenges. And then there's the art of overcoming that. So let's take a look and dissect these components in a particular story. So here's an article from a French paper, Economic, and we talked about this was the actual talk with some text. This is about presenting about the recovery of the Great Recession in Europe. Okay. So if you look at this combines maps, it combines statistics, and also combines the interactions of this thing. So if I click on this, it will go again here. Oh, great, it's fast one. It's like an old car, it takes a while to get going. So all of these presentations, all of these visual galleries, we call it dashboards, are stored on Tableau Public's website. When Mark talked about Tableau giving out software for free, it's actually true. There's a site called Tableau Public, and you can utilize the application for free. The only thing is whatever you create has to be published for the public. So typically we will see work there from reporters, newspapers, agencies, and things like that. So I'm not going to interact with this, but basically you look at this, you can see, as we go through this, who are the characters? The characters here are the people of Europe, of all race, colors, and regions. It covers also what are the challenges. Looking at this particular map, you can see the challenge. The red is which countries are still basically in recession prior to the Great Recession and climbing out of that. Looking at this number, these statistics here, you can see by year that a lot of countries have gone from red to green. But there are still numerous countries below here that are still in red and also in the top. So by looking at this, you can see now that although the Great Recession is basically over, but it illustrates that, hey, there's a high chance of southern Europe potentially being very rocky, that they can go back into the Great Recession again. So this story it's difficult to illustrate by just using numbers. It's very difficult to look at just numbers. But if you highlight both numbers, referencing it with maps, and interacting with it, allowing you to interact with it, will communicate that story component. So creating a story is not a linear process. It's not, you don't take your data in, massage it in Excel or with EnerGIS, and you publish it, but it's an iterative process. It's you in the center, going back, in and out, producing the product, taking the data, generating something out of it, looking at it, and you know what? At that particular time, maybe you would say, hey, I found this insight, but there's another problem I have to address. So then going in and out, that whole process, for us, it's called the cycle of visual analysis. And if you do this over and over to achieve those 4 things that we talked about, your presentation, your PowerPoint, will be a very compelling story in terms of what you want to deliver. Let's take a look at some of the best practices for creating stories with data. Here is an example of oil and gas and what we can do with it using maps. This group is very familiar with using maps, but allowing the maps to interact with the user when they look at it, that will be a challenge here. Normally it's not. I should have ran it locally on my laptop. So what we have here are two map windows. One, the left map window illustrates the locations of the oil and gas rigs around Australia. And the image on the right illustrates the earthquakes around Australia. So by interacting with these 2 elements, you then can see potentially if there are earthquakes that are going to affect your operation. Also, by clicking on the various rigs, you can then see the production results and statistics related to that particular rig. But the analysis here now is not done on one piece of map. It's not done on a heavily loaded map with a lot of content. You can now interact with 2 different things, or you can interact with one map, but you're bringing in ancillary data live to feed and support your own data that you're trying to use. And so even when you talk about maps, this particular image here is not a map, but a map is not a map. If you take a look at this, if you show only statistics of this particular picture, throwing balls, and look at those graphs, it's kind of hard to look at. And you look at those in terms of numbers, it's even harder for your brain to conceive and what does that mean? Throw a little box up there, a little rectangle. You can now very easily make an association between colors and stats. So things like this, simple things like this, can really, really highlight and bring your reports up to the next level. Time is also a very critical element of creating a great story. So with time, typically when you work with a graph, time is typically an x-axis. But again, interacting with this allows us to see, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. But interacting with this by, if you clicked on these particular rigs, oh, great. Some building some time. Again, we're taking to the this particular page online. And so you can see here, by hovering over these points, you can get additional insights about what that rig is. The name, also the total oil for that particular year. But by clicking on it, it will highlight, interact with that statistic, with that data. And it tells me here over the various years, this is the total oil produced. I can interact with this like this. I can also pan and zoom maps, just like any traditional GIS. But again, making the medium, changing your medium and making that interactive, this process, is the key to allow your audience to play with it and to get additional insight. You can also go down here by year. You can select by all to see the stats. In telling a great story, pictures also will create some additional references. Pictures make the characters real. So in this particular case, if we just have statistics about these tennis players and show them where they are on the maps in terms of where they live, a lot of you wouldn't know who these players are. If you throw pictures up there and associate those with numbers, immediately people can create that association. And again, here are players, but if you associate this to your world, to the world that we live in, the work that we did, those can be oil rigs, those can be issues, those can be challenges that you face. And by associating, bringing in pictures to your PowerPoint, to your reports, it changes the process of absorbing that data. Here's another example of interacting with the maps and how you can achieve additional insight by making this map more interactive. Again, click on this. We go to this particular gallery, and we can interact with this map or this report. This is actually a report. So instead of giving just numbers, we're illustrating it this way. Maps are here. By floating over it, you can see some critical elements of that particular rig. And by selecting on it, you can dive immediately down into the specifics of that particular rig. And by allowing this interaction both between the rig, the information, and also the geographic info, this total interactive dashboard now becomes your report. It's not a static report anymore. It's a very dynamic report. It allows your user to interact and gain more insight from that. Also, in building a great story, you also want to be building from things that are familiar to people. So in this particular report, it basically outlines the statistics of the English Premier League, and by showing traditionally the names on the left, but they also show logos. So again, by bringing in additional logos and so forth, adds additional references to your content. Context, this is a great one. So this particular one is about Felix jumping off in the atmosphere. So we know there are not a lot of measurement when it comes to this particular activity. He jumped very high, he jumped very long, but there's no context to that. So how do you add context? In this particular case, what this author did was he added the context of, hey, you know what, this guy jumped and at a certain altitude, almost at a stratosphere, and he is X times higher in terms of jumping than Mount Everest, for example. How fast did he go? Well, he went about 4.3 seconds, right? And how long did he go? How long did he jump? It was about 4.3 minutes. 4.3 minutes was actually about the duration of a song called, what was that song? The Free Falling. Yes, Free Falling. Free Falling was 4.3. I think he did 4.7 actually. Yeah, there you go. Oh, he's 4.3. So by adding additional context to something that is very, very phenomenal in terms of an experience like that, will allow the user to gain additional insights in terms of relating that to something that they know. Patterns in a data story. Let's go look at some patterns. In creating your reports and data stories, you want to create some patterns. You want to look for patterns as you look at the reports. You're very familiar with doing that on a spreadsheet and perhaps even looking at it on a map. But interacting the two together allows you to provide additional tools for the audience to gain additional insights. Let me see if I can run this thing. Yes, absolutely. I'm jumping very fast through these examples only because of time. But if you look at it, really, you can spend half a day looking at any one of these things. So here, by interacting with each of these states, you can see And it allows you to see, look, the number of states, the number of counties, what are the statistics in terms of hypertension in that particular area. And again, this particular PowerPoint and the links are available. Mark has them, so if you'd like to dive a little deeper to understand what that is about, then you can do that. So you want to balance also when you're creating a story. A lot of it is very, very, very deep in terms of context, deep in terms of data, but balance it with some big pictures. So here we have basically, we're communicating what are the oil rigs worldwide in terms of land versus sea, and what are the total gross revenue from those oil rigs. So if you look at it here, it's a very simplified way to communicate that, but very rich context data behind that. And so we brought the heavy data into a very into a resolution where it's not so overwhelming for the user when they read it. So by interacting with this, you can see here the percentage of rigs that are land versus offshore. And you can, by clicking on it, it will also derive different values down here. So you want to also allow your reader to explore. I mentioned this many, many times. And so with the exploration process, it depends on the platform and medium that you use. This particular medium is one way. There are other software and platforms that we can use. But creating georeferencing material to stats and allowing those to interact with each other will provide the value that your user will get if they expect a story. This is a good one. This is something very, very new. In terms of creating a story, we typically go through the steps that I did, slide by slide by slide. Here's a particular tool recently released by Tableau Software in 8.2 that will allow you to create that story within one application. So this particular one is about taking a look at the teacher around Austin and a turnover of those teachers. So if we look at the first story, this is the story here. This shows a geographic map of Austin and the surrounding areas and the various bubbles meaning the turnover rates of those school districts or schools. And if we go to the next story, Austin teachers, the turnover rate is much higher than the average on a national scale. There's the US average, there are the rates for the Austin teachers. You can see here, I'm walking the reader through a story, through a process. In this particular slide, we now look at the problem. What are the problems? Where are the problems heavy at? In what school or what district? And in a citywide basis, the problem isn't getting any better, right? I mean, it's getting higher and higher and higher. And out of all of these stats, basically one school, Atkins, needs the most attention. So as you can see here, by creating a very simple set of dashboards and associating that to the points that you want to convey, you now walk your reader through a process that you outline. So by delivering a report only, there's a lot of info in there. It's kind of hard to explore, but then they'll have to find their own thing. But if you walk them through a series of stories, whether they are through PowerPoint slides or through a tool like this, or through different methodologies, it's about creating that story from beginning to the end. So finally, let's take this 5-second test. If you look at this map, there's a lot of stuff. You look at these bars, there's a lot of info. But it's about finding Bigfoot. So where do you think Bigfoot exists? Seattle, Washington, where Tableau is. So again, visually, there's a lot of information here. But again, depending on what it is that you want to convey, the reader should be able to grab that point immediately with this map, with this particular story. So at the end, I want to close it up. I think I'm just right on time, a little bit over. Tableau, our mission statement is very simple. What we do is we help people see and understand their data. And through the various technical difficulties here, I don't think you got that, but the application is available, the PowerPoint is available. Dive into the details. I'm available all day today. I'm looking forward to meeting with you individually if you have some interest in looking at different mediums and platforms to use within your production and how you communicate your reports and how you generate the data. Okay.